All right, let's try this again. Tried to record this once and it didn't record. Who knows why? Gremlins, monsters, ghosts, spirits, magic, mystery. Don't know. Happened. What I was trying to talk about was variance and variation. A lot of talks over the past couple of weeks, and not really talks, but Twitter battles in YouTube comments. People do not understand variance at all, even a little bit. You may say, "What the hell's variance, Mark? What are you on about?" Well, look, Nassim Taleb, great stuff. Read all his books. Talks about this. So if you plot something like the stock market, right? What you see when you get out, say 150 years, because the stock market's about 150 years old in the U.S. anyway, um, is you see this line pretty much, and these spikes, every whatever years, and that's it. Because large events like depressions and financial crashes and such not create huge outliers, right? So that if you take an average when those outliers aren't happening, you have something that looks like this. But if you account for the outlier, that goes flat. All the variance, the variation in the numbers is basically too small to count. So it looks like a flat line. Now, the lack of variation in the computer industry is impressive. So what you have a few, way less than 1% star developers. And then you have a lot of people who know variables and recursion and nothing else at all. It's amazing. So I was doing some interviews recently for this new startup I'm working with, and we're asking, this guy's, I'm a full stack developer. I think it was a 16-week course. And I was like, that's great. What programming languages did you learn? Yeah, nothing I would call a programming language. Tell me the difference between PHP and JavaScript, which, one's server-based, one's client-based. It's a typical answer. Yeah. What database did you install? Yeah. No full stack experience whatsoever. Despite the boot camp. So we got a bunch of people who went to boot camp for some number of weeks, 4 weeks, 16 weeks, whatever weeks, got some kind of certificate. They're all the same. There's no variance in there, right? Then you got a guy like, what's his name? Marcus Friend, I think, who started Plenty of Fish. And if you don't know that story, it's amazing, right? It's like, he goes, I want to learn ASP, which is Microsoft's, crazy scripting language. This is a while back, right? So I want to learn ASP. So what do I do? I'm just gonna write this like dating website. Just a silly app. So when you want to learn a programming language or scripting language or whatever, because ASP is kind of a scripting language, right? The last thing you want to do is use a library, because if you're using the library, you're not coding it in the language anymore. So you don't really learn the language, right? And not to say don't use libraries. You shouldn't. No, of course you need to use libraries sometimes, but you should try to write all the libraries natively if you can. And that's less possible in scripting languages. Don't want to get too technical. So he writes this stuff. He gets to run this website on Microsoft systems that's scalable, which is already like, boom, mind blown. I would have said it wasn't possible on like 5 servers. And then, he's making like, I don't know, I think it was 3 million a year on the website. He was not starting a business. He was not trying to write a dating website to make money. He wasn't doing any of that. That wasn't what he was trying to do. So, this is remarkable. This is absolutely freaking remarkable. He's a next level guy. Jonathan Blow. Love him, hate him. I'm not a particular fan. Next level guy, right? You're seeing these next level guys and going, oh, they're programmers. And you're going, oh, other programmers are software engineers, other software. No, they are outliers. They are way up here. Everybody else is way down here. And most people who are way down here never get higher than this. Like it's not equivalent. And that's the problem. It's not equivalent. So variance exists not just, say, in the computer industry. Uncle Bob Martin talks about this. This is 4 or 5, maybe 6 years ago now. He says, look, you just do the math, actual numbers. Half of the software engineers entering the market have 5 or fewer years of experience. It's like, so you've got half the people in the market have 5 or fewer years of experience in software engineering. They know nothing. Zero. Have not enough experience to really know how to do good software. That's half. It's way more than that now. And then you've got these superstars who do, 90% of the work, basically. And fair enough, a lot of industries work that way. But also, everything in life is that way, though. Where if you're not measuring the variance, you don't really know anything, because averages don't show you any useful data in a high variance data set. What do you mean? Somebody brought this up. Said the median salary in the U.S. was $30,000 a year. The median house prices, whatever, right? Haha, I've got you. Few problems with that number. A, it's not 30. It's not even close. It's at least 46. B, the way that number is collected, the last time I checked, was it counts all the people and divides by the salary, and it doesn't subtract out the people who cannot work, who are either over retirement age, that's one set, or below, work age, right? Below 18 in most states. It doesn't do that. So the number's already skewed. Now, the bigger problem with this is that you have a very high variance in the United States. And in fact, most states have a high variance. So it doesn't work to average out the average income for states in most cases either. There are some exceptions to that rule, but I don't know how many. So what do you mean? Here's what I mean. If you live in, and this was 4 or 5 years ago, if you live in Oakland, California, and you make less than $175,000 a year, you're in poverty. You're in poverty. If you make $175,000 a year where I live, you have an RV and 2 houses and 10 children. Wouldn't make any difference. That is a huge amount of money in South Carolina. Unless you live in Charleston, or there's some places in South Carolina you could live that are super expensive. Downtown Columbia is pretty expensive. I'm 20 miles out of downtown Columbia. It doesn't cost anything to live here. I bought this house cash. It's not a big deal. There's other houses. There was a house for $35,000 on 3 acres, ready to move in. I mean, I would have immediately gotten rid of it and bought a new house and put it on the foundation, but it was $35,000, So there's another one for like 75 grand in a very nice area, actually, not too far from here. Very nice area. Same deal. I would have just done away with that and put a newer house on it, but didn't need to do that. I got a much better deal here. So that variance between California or Boston or New York or San Francisco or LA or whatever, and almost every other place is huge. It's absolutely huge. Even in Massachusetts back in the day, people would ask me like, "Oh, it's so expensive to live in Massachusetts." I'm like, "Not out west. You go to Western Massachusetts, costs anything. You make $25,000 a year, they live fine. They live fine with kids." And they didn't understand that. They were like, "But Boston's so expensive and everything around Boston's." Yes, but if you don't need to live in the city and you just want to live, it's actually not that expensive. You're going to be far from the city, though. It's trade-offs. I have a video on trade-offs on navigating patterns. It's trade-off. And people don't like trade-offs. I get that. I would like to have everything that I want the way I want it too. But we weren't born into that world, so not an option. Variance is used to fool people all the time. You can't roll up numbers for the US and find out anything meaningful for most things, because the US is a huge place with a high variance. What it costs to live in the Midwest versus what it costs to live on the coasts. It's not comparable. It's not fair. Down here, I can work at a grocery store and make all the money to cover all my bills. I could not do that 25 miles out of the capital city of Massachusetts. I can do that 20 miles out of the capital city of South Carolina. That's a big difference. You know, in Massachusetts, you had to make something like $50,000, probably a little bit more by the time I left, a year just to live where I was. And I was 25 miles out of the capital city. You know, 6 years later, I don't have to make that much, even with all the inflation, to live here 20 miles out of the capital city. I don't know what to tell you. It's a huge difference. It's huge. So it's half is what it is. When you have a variance like that, and other places are even cheaper, right? When you have a variance like that, there's no competition. Now, I could reduce my expenses. I could get rid of my cables, which is never going to happen. I could get rid of my cable, right? I could grow food and get my grocery bill down, right? I could drive used cars again, although I suspect that'd be more expensive than driving new cars for other reasons. There are ways to reduce my expenses further if I were so inclined, and if I don't need internet. There were houses for under $50,000 that are comparable to this house. Just the only reason why I didn't buy them is because of internet. They're still available now. So there's houses down the street from me, brand new builds at $120,000. They're not on any land or anything I would call land. They're on half an acre or an acre or something. And they're, in developments. They're $120,000. And they're, 3,200 square feet with a 2-car garage and just crazy, beautiful, beautiful places. You can also pay $230,000 for that right now. I'm talking about right this minute. South Carolina. Not too far away, right down the street from me. You're not going to get that in Massachusetts in Eastern Mass anywhere, So the variance is pretty heavy. I mean, you're not going to get that in Charleston. You want to get by the coast there. You might get by the coast, just not near Charleston. You're not even going to get that in Columbia, which is the capital. But these things are available. The variance is very high. What people make and when they make it actually matters too. And if you don't account for that, you have a bunch of dead malls like you do down here. We have a bunch of dead malls because nobody knows how to do the difference between salary that you get paid every week or every month versus the difference in when you make most of your money once or twice a year. All right, so you may make $100,000, but it's $50,000 twice a year. You spend differently when that happens, right? You have a different sense of time and money and things like that. All these are factors. And because we've reduced, to some extent, the number of good programmers, so we have a very high variance at the top end, right, of the programming field, what we end up with is garbage software everywhere, on every device. Very unstable operating systems. And it's very hard to get good troubleshooting, very hard to get good performance people, very hard to get good process architecture, cost reduction people, all those skills that sort of require that next level. Very hard to find these people. A lot of them are locked up in companies and not necessarily at Google. So a lot of the software that's being modified is getting worse and worse and worse and worse as time goes on. High variation, high variance, but low overall quality of software because most of the people just aren't that good. They don't have that much experience. They probably don't have the aptitude, to be fair. Being good at something, by definition, means you're rare and skilled. And so the number of good people in any field is low. By definition, it's a hierarchy. It doesn't change. You can try to lift the bottom up, but actually all you do is exemplify the top and lift that up even further. And people don't understand that. It happens with money too, by the way. It happens with wealth over time. Although income inequality has gotten so much better in the past, like 400 years, 800 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, that whining about it seems actually pointless. Look up serfdom, and it used to be 12 families literally owned all the wealth on the planet. And look, the late 1800s, 12 families owned all the wealth in the United States. That's gotten better, a lot better. Lower variance for wealth. We didn't have a top 1%. We had a top 0.001%. And now we have a top 1%. Not bad. We're doing good. We're doing good. Keeping an eye on what's lower and higher variance and when to use averages, medians, and means is really important, especially with stock market stuff. But any numbers, you got to be really careful. High variance data sets do not work well with averages or medians or means. Don't do it. Don't cut the outliers out and look for the averages either, unless you're doing certain specific things. You got to be real careful with this stuff. And ironically, what I just said is a lot of the problem in software engineering that people don't even understand. They don't have any clue about variance and averages and how to use them correctly. They don't know about statistics. Nassim Taleb, read all his books. I got on him before Black Swan. I was reading Fooled by Randomness because I was in the middle of my initial stock market deep dive where I learned all about stock trading and day trading and swing trading and all the differences. Wrote a bunch of software too around that. Still working on modifying that software to this day. He had it right. His books are good. They're all easy to read. They're low on math, and you can skip all the math and you'll understand everything just fine. He says that in the books. It's true. Understanding these things is non-trivial, but super important. And we need to pay attention to it because it affects not just computers, but also every part of our life. When we try to use normalization standards, like what's normal across the population, we fail to see how different people are. So different people react differently in the same circumstances. And we don't appreciate that because we're not appreciating variance. We've reduced everything to an average. Averages are a bad way to think about the world, especially the high variance world we live in as humans. It shows up in computers. It shows up everywhere in your life. And it disconnects you from reality because you're trying to adhere to a standard, and that standard is not a reasonable standard for you to engage in. So, variance. Know about it. Consider it. Don't get stuck with normative standards and averages. Normalization is a dangerous process. It's only appropriate in certain circumstances, and probably not with humans, because there is a lot of variance between people. Just ask siblings who grew up together about the same events in their lives that they experienced. Just experience the same event at different ages has a different impact, but even if it's the same age, you'd be amazed. That's all I got for you. I hope it's enough.